I didn't try to find it. The contact took place right now. Things were just there with the entity. Not a warning about the future, but a revelation about our past was the first and only thing it wanted to tell us. Not a single threat or empty promise came from the alien. Instead, it shocked them into understanding how powerful Jesus really is. They don't think of this power as blind faith. They see it as a code, a recognized and used reality manipulation algorithm throughout the galaxy. The only simple question left is, does knowing the key to this sin give us control over our lives? Or is it just the next thing we should study? Kindly like this video if you think faith can help us understand the most mysterious things in the universe. Even though it's a small thing, doing it shows that you spiritually agree with this message and helps other people who are praying for answers get these revelations. The way you think about yourself will change after this revelation. Sign up and like this video right now if you want to see this private information. It's your pass to the unknown. And if you're ready to figure out your own part of the code, the next step is to read my ebook, Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence. There is a link in the text. There is no noise. Now starts the story that makes us question our reality. Even though the code was sent, there is still one question that no one can answer. Why did this cosmic force pick him? The most important revelation in the universe was given to Walter Bennett. You have to know the man who got everything to understand what the visitor did. Walt got up at 5:30 every day. The only reason he got up was because his back hurt too much to sleep any longer. Even though he was 64, he felt like he was 80. It was cruel that he had arthritis because he needed his hands to work as a carpenter. His ears hurt from his high blood pressure, which was barely under control with medicine. Then there was that cough that wouldn't go away. They said Walt had chronic bronchitis, but Walt really thought it was something worse in the middle of the night. Since Martha died 5 years ago, he had lived alone in sin. She died of pancreatic cancer. The funeral happened only 4 months after the diagnosis. Walt still tried to avoid looking at the picture of her in the living room. It was of her smiling while holding a bouquet of daisies in a garden that didn't exist anymore. I didn't try to find it. The contact took place right now. Things were just there with the entity. Not a warning about the future, but a revelation about our past was the first and only thing it wanted to tell us. Not a single threat or empty promise came from the alien. Instead, it shocked them into understanding how powerful Jesus really is. They don't think of this power as blind faith. They see it as a code, a recognized and used reality manipulation algorithm throughout the galaxy. The only simple question left is, does knowing the key to this sin give us control over our lives? Or is it just the next thing we should study? Kindly like this video if you think faith can help us understand the most mysterious things in the universe. Even though it's a small thing, doing it shows that you spiritually agree with this message and helps other people who are praying for answers get these revelations. The way you think about yourself will change after this revelation. Sign up and like this video right now if you want to see this private information. It's your pass to the unknown. And if you're ready to figure out your own part of the code, the next step is to read my ebook, Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence. There is a link in the text. There is no noise. Now starts the story that makes us question our reality. Even though the code was sent, there is still one question that no one can answer. Why did this cosmic force pick him? The most important revelation in the universe was given to Walter Bennett. You have to know the man who got everything to understand what the visitor did. Walt got up at 5:30 every day. The only reason he got up was because his back hurt too much to sleep any longer. Even though he was 64, he felt like he was 80. It was cruel that he had arthritis, because he needed his hands to work as a carpenter. His ears hurt from his high blood pressure, which was barely under control with medicine. Then there was that cough that wouldn't go away. They said Walt had chronic bronchitis, but Walt really thought it was something worse in the middle of the night. Since Martha died 5 years ago, he had lived alone in sin. She died of pancreatic cancer. The funeral happened only 4 months after the diagnosis. Walt still tried to avoid looking at the picture of her in the living room. It was of her smiling while holding a bouquet of daisies in a garden that didn't exist anymore. He pushed these thoughts away right away. They came from the devil and were temptations. Walt was afraid of losing the only thing he had left, the hope that maybe there would be peace after death. Testing faith was a risky game. He might finally be able to rest in heaven. There might be no pain, no bills, and no loneliness that hurt like a knife for him. But until then, he would just keep going, like he always did. Walt worked late that night. He was too tired to sleep anyway, and the work kept his mind busy. Only a few changes needed to be made to the leg joints on the oak chair before it was almost done. He was carefully sanding the wood, feeling the rough surface with his rough-knit fingers, when he realized he was crying. He had no idea why. Maybe they were too tired. It could have been the loneliness that had been with her all the time since Martha died. He might have been afraid that he was getting old alone, that he would die alone in that cold house, and that no one would miss him. With the dirty back of his hand, Walt wiped his eyes and tried to get back to work. He stopped and looked at his shaking hands, his old tools, and the workshop, which was so badly built that it looked more like a makeshift shelter than a place of business. He asked in a low voice, "Is this it? Is this all there is to my life? I'm 74 years old, and all I have is debt, pain, and a workshop that is falling apart." They didn't answer the question, just like all the other questions he had asked over the years. Walt was mad at himself and shook his head. Lack of gratitude. He wasn't being thankful. He was in good enough shape to work. He had a place to sleep. Even though there wasn't much, he had food in the fridge. A lot of them had less. What did he have to say? He whispered, "Forgive me, Lord," and picked up the saw again. "Forgive my weakness." At exactly that moment, 10:53 p.m. on a normal November Tuesday night, the world went silent like a heavy curtain. Through the holes in the wooden wall, a blue light started to pulse. Walt stood still, his hand shaking with the saw. The mere thought of something being out there made every hair on his body stand on end. Something that held all the answers he had never been brave enough to ask, but he didn't know it yet. A flashlight was the first thing Walt thought of. It had to be a strong flashlight. It could be a city security guard walking around rural properties, or a stupid teen pulling a prank on the old man on the hill who lives alone. It made sense. It made perfect sense. The light didn't move like a lantern, though. It didn't flash. It didn't move. As if it were breathing, it just pulsed in a steady loop, and that quiet. The damned silence that had taken away all the night's sounds didn't make any sense. Walt put the saw on the workbench very carefully, even though his fingers were still shaking. He took 3 steps toward the dirty window, but stopped in the middle when something strange hit him. There were no dark spots. No one could tell where the light was coming from, because it was coming from everywhere at once and spreading across the lawn like a bright mist. He said to himself, "Helicopter," even though he knew there wasn't a sound of blades. It has to be a helicopter with a spotlight, maybe looking for a fugitive. But the engine didn't make a noise. The air didn't have any vibration. There was only that bluish light and a deep silence. Walt could hear his own heart beating. He had to force himself to walk to the window. He looked out the window as he wiped the glass clean with the sleeve of his old flannel shirt. It looked like daytime on the lawn, but it was a strange, blue, unreal day. The trees around the property cast many shadows, making it look like there are many light sources. Walt blinked in the middle of the lawn. That's not possible. There was a shape, not quite solid, more like a distortion in the air, like seeing through hot asphalt in the summer. But this distortion had rough, almost humanoid shapes. Slowly it moved toward the shop. Walt said, "Reflection," out loud, and his voice was higher than usual. "What you see is just a reflection in the glass. Or, I'm too tired. I need to go to sleep." He didn't move, though. He wasn't able to. He knew deep down that what he saw wasn't tiredness or a trick of the light. It was something basic and old. It was true, real, but impossible and scary. Not far from the workshop, the shape came to a stop. Walt had a bump in his stomach. He still couldn't make out any details. All he could see were fuzzy shapes, surrounded by a light that looked like it came from the presence. But he had a strong sense that someone was watching him. Learned. Looked at. "Drone!" Walt pleaded desperately, holding on to reason like a lost person, holding on to wreckage. It must be one of those cool new drones with lights. Joe from the valley may have bought one and is now testing it at night. But Joe was 82 years old and had a hard time using his cell phone. Drones also made noise. Drones didn't make bubbles of complete silence that sucked in the world, the wind, and crickets. Walt moved away from the window and took a quick breath. Even though it was November, he could feel a cold sweat running down his back. He looked for the cross made of wood that was on the wall. He took it in both hands and held it up like a shield to his chest. He said in a low voice, "Lord, protect me." But the words just came out on their own, empty, like they had every year for 5 years. "Lord, let me know if there is anything barred outside. As your unworthy servant, I beg you to keep me safe." It looked like the light had heard him because it got brighter. Walt let out a gasp and stepped back 2 steps. When he stepped on something, it hit a stack of pine boards against the wall. "Break up!" The noise was so loud that it was hard to hear anything else. Walt froze because he was scared that he had let a dangerous animal know where he was. There was silence for a long time. The outside light kept switching on and off. The shape stayed where it was. Walt held on to the cross so tight that his painful, arthritic joints started to scream. After that, the sounds came back as if someone had flipped a switch. It was time for the crickets to sing again. Cracks let the wind blow through. The light slowly went out, like a lamp being turned down on a slow dimmer. Walt breathed out a breath he didn't know he was holding. What looked like a shape on the lawn turned into a haze. Then nothing. The normal darkness of the night came back, with only a dim yellow light from the workshop to break up the darkness. He fell to the ground, shaking all over as he held on to the cross. He touched his sweaty face and tried to figure out what he had just seen. Or not seen. Or thought of. Hallucination. He shook his head and said to the empty workshop, "I have too much work to do. It's a side effect of the medicine for high blood pressure. Or I should eat better. Doesn't low blood sugar cause hallucinations?" But Walt knew he was lying to himself, even as he came up with these logical reasons. Something had caught his eye. He had a feeling. There was no doubt that presence was real. His heart rate slowed down as he sat on the floor for 10 more minutes. He stood up slowly after that. He put his tools away and turned off the lights in the workshop in a strict way. Walt took one last look at the dark lawn before locking the door and going home. Nothing. There was nothing there but darkness, trees swaying in the cold wind, and a sky full of stars that seemed to make fun of his shaky beliefs. He told himself it was just tiredness as he walked the 20 yards to the house. Tomorrow I'll laugh about this. I'm an old fool who is afraid of lights and reflections. But when he got inside, he locked the door more tightly than was needed. Before going to his room, he looked out all the windows twice. He didn't want to waste time in case he had to run, so he laid down on the bed, still dressed. Walt knew that he didn't believe any of the things he was telling himself. There had been something out there. And what scared him the most was that he knew it would come back. He made a strong cup of coffee, sat down at the kitchen table, and told himself he wasn't so angry after all. What is that light? Probably something happening in the atmosphere. What's that? A chance event. The mind looks for patterns where there aren't any and makes stories out of chaos. He read that somewhere. However, Walt had to force himself to walk to the workshop to finish the chair when the sun came up. There, he saw something that made his stomach drop. There was a mark on the grass, right where the shape had been the night before. The burned grass was in a perfect circle about 2 meters across. The grass didn't look like it had been burned by a normal fire. Instead, it looked like something had taken away all of its color and life. Walt got down on his knees next to the circle. He touched the dead grass with his hand. It was quite cold and hard. It seemed like there was a lot of presence in the middle, where there was a strange, almost geometric pattern in the ground. He didn't recognize the symbols. They were just lines and curves twisted together in ways that couldn't be by chance. He said out loud, "Lightning," but his voice didn't sound strong. It had to be lightning that struck during the night. There hadn't been a storm, though. It did not rain. Also, lightning didn't make patterns on the ground. Walt stood there for a long time, staring at the physical proof that could not be argued with. It wasn't a fake dream. It wasn't being tired. There was something there. Something that was seen and felt in the real world. His legs were shaking as he walked back to the workshop. He pulled out his old cell phone and took pictures of the circle. He had such bad hand shaking that half of the pictures were blurry, but he did get a few good ones. Proof. Now he had proof. What kind of proof is this? He had no idea, but proof that he wasn't crazy. Walt tried to work that morning, but he was having trouble focusing. He jumped at every sound outside. He felt tense every time the light from the windows changed. A third time, he picked up the chair to sand the same spot that was already smooth. But he gave up. He drove into town at 11 a.m. Besides supplies, he mostly needed things to be normal again. He needed to talk to people, even if it was just about the weather. Anything that would bring him back to normal life. He saw Mary, the owner of the bakery, buying flour at the market. They said hello to each other politely. Walt almost told them what he saw. Almost. He thought about how it would sound, though. "Hi, Mary. Last night, an alien light struck my lawn and left a burned circle." She would think he had finally gone crazy from being alone. Walt then went to the store, bought bread, milk and coffee, paid quietly, and then went home. It was worse in the afternoon than in the morning. Walt couldn't take his eyes off the circle on the lawn outside the window. The mark looked even more real and clear when it was daylight. He also wanted night to come, though it was only a small part of him. He was interested in whether it would happen again. He wanted to know. Walt turned on the shop lights at 7 p.m. and tried to finish the chair. Do your job. Every day. normalcy. But his ears were very sensitive to any changes in the sound. He stopped every time he heard the leaves rustling outside. 9 p.m. Nothing. 10 p.m. Nothing. Walt was starting to feel better by 10:40 p.m. He thought that maybe it had been a one-time thing, an oddity. He then felt it. The air changed. The pressure built up like before a storm, but the sky was still clear. And then, slowly, it began. There were no more crickets singing. There was no more wind. Like that invisible curtain, silence descended. Walt dropped the sandpaper he was holding because his heart was beating so fast. Not again! Please, do not do it again. He kept telling himself that it wasn't true, but he saw the first flash of blue light through the wall cracks. It was dimmer than the night before, almost shy, like it was trying things out. Waiting. This time something new came with the light. Sense of what? It wasn't a thought, it wasn't a voice. Walt thought someone was calling, though. I wasn't calling him by name. I was just asking for his attention and presence. Getting him to look. Telling him not to leave. Walt whispered, "No," and stepped back toward the far wall of the workshop. No, no, no. Leave. No matter what you are, leave. But the light kept flashing, and the feeling of being called got stronger. It was so strong that Walt couldn't figure out why hot tears were running down his face. Fear wasn't the only thing. It wasn't that. It felt like an old, forgotten memory was trying to come back to the surface. Note: have you ever felt like something was calling to you that you couldn't explain? Something that your logical mind doesn't accept, but that your soul does? If you've ever felt this way, tell us in the comments. Walt held the cross to his chest once more, but the prayer didn't come. He couldn't say anything because he wasn't sure if he was facing something bad or just different for the first time in his life. Not possible. Not able to understand. Not knowing was scarier than any demon he had heard about in his childhood sermons. The thing Walt didn't know was that the presence wasn't trying to scare him. It was ready. Can't wait for him to stop hiding and running away. The next truth would destroy all of his fears and limiting beliefs. At that time, Walt did the only thing that made sense. He ran away. He didn't get tools or turn off the lights. He quickly ran from the shop to the house. Even though his lungs hurt and his old legs hurt, fear drove him across the cold lawn. He rushed into the house, locked the door, and pulled all the curtains closed. He turned off the lights and sat in the living room corner. As a child, he used to hide in that spot between the couch and the wall when his drunk dad came home. A little spot. Safe. Not seen. He whispered, "It's not going to happen," while holding his knees close to his chest. It's stress. It's being alone. There's something wrong with my mind. Tomorrow I'm going to the doctor. People with brain tumors have hallucinations. That has to be it. But Walt knew the truth, even as he made up these desperate reasons. The circle that was on fire was real. It was a real picture. And that calling, that soft but strong pull on his conscience, was more real than anything he had felt in years. He did nothing for an hour. 2. When Walt finally got up, the kitchen clock was about to strike midnight. His legs felt like they were on fire. He limped over to the front window and pulled back the curtain just enough to see what was outside. There was still light. It's better now. Pulsing in the middle of the lawn, right where the circle showed the ground. And the shape became clearer and stronger, as if it had gained substance through hard work and patience. Walt took down the curtain, stepped back, and hit his back against the wall. He could feel his heart beating in his throat because it was beating so fast. "Go away," he said through clenched teeth, his eyes burning with anger. "This is not what I want. This wasn't what I asked for. Please, please leave me alone. Silence. The word wasn't in the room. As he became more aware of the strange silence, the whole house fell into it. No hum from the fridge. There is no ticking. Nothing. Then Walt heard it for the first time, not with his ears, but in his mind, as clear as glass. You asked. You ask for answers every night. Walt was frozen and he couldn't breathe. In reality, that voice wasn't a voice. It was a presence in his mind that touched on feelings he barely acknowledged to himself. No, he said carefully. No, I pray to God, to the Lord, not to you, no matter what you are. I know, easy, just 2 words. Still, they meant more than Walt could understand. These words set off a wave of something he hadn't seen coming, feeling sorry. Not pity, but real care for them. That presence seemed to know every wound, every pain, and every night Walt had cried alone, wanting just one sign that he wasn't being left. Walt yelled, "Get out of my head," while pressing his palms to his temples. "You have no right. We don't want you here." But a bad part of Walt didn't want the presence to leave, even as he screamed. There was someone else besides Martha for the first time in 5 years since she died. There was something there. Something saw him. Something that made sense, and that made me feel both scared and safe. Walt slid down the wall and sat down on the floor with his hands over his head. His voice broke as he said, "I can't take this. I'm old. I'm worn out. Before I die, all I want is peace." Is that too much to ask? Peace? He kept hearing the word over and over in his mind, as if the presence were tasting the idea. You haven't had peace for a long time. It wasn't a question. What was said was true. It was clear that it hurt. "And what did you come for?" Walt asked in a mean way, his eyes still closed. "To kill me with fear? Because everything works fine. I came to show you." "Show what?" "Keep quiet." Then Walt almost missed it because it was so soft. "What you forgot." Walt slowly opened his eyes. The room was dark, but he could see the blue light coming from outside through the crack in the curtain. Hold on. Not giving up. Never ending. He was able to keep going. He could lie about trespassers and call the police tomorrow. He could leave, drive into town, stay at a cheap motel, and never come back. He knew it wasn't going to help, though. That presence had nothing to do with the property. It had something to do with him. Also, it's impossible to get away from something that lives inside your consciousness. Walt had a hard time getting up. His joints were aching. He went to the window and pulled the curtain all the way back, exposing the room to alien light. It was there, in the middle of the grass, waiting. The shape looked more like a person now, but it was still clearly not human. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, and had long, graceful arms and legs. As if each cell in it were its own source of energy, light came out of it. Walt put his hand on the window's cool glass. The presence slightly cocked its head, which was a strange movement. "What do you want from me?" Walt spoke quietly. He wasn't expecting an answer, but one came through, loud and clear. "Everything you ever wanted." Truth? True. This was the last chance for Walt Bennett to get away. He had his hand on the cold glass, and that impossible being was staring back at him through the night. Either he would accept it, or he would go crazy trying to stay away from it. There wasn't a third choice. Maybe Walt would have kept running if he knew that the truth would destroy everything he thought he knew about God, Jesus, and his own worth. But maybe a part of him was sick of lying to feel good. Sick of being little. That night, Walt didn't sleep. He watched the light pulse from the chair in the living room until dawn. As soon as the first rays of sunlight hit the horizon, the presence was gone. It didn't fly away, it just stopped existing, like a switch was flipped. Walt worked up the courage to walk out onto the lawn at 6 a.m. Now there were 3 rings of burned grass. One was from 2 days ago, one was from last night, and the third one he hadn't seen form. There were other things too. They had impossible to miss straight lines carved into the ground between them that connected the 3 points and made a perfect triangle. There were also symbols inside the triangle, not Egyptian writing, not words, but geometric shapes that fit together and seemed to move when he looked at them directly. Walt got down on his knees and touched a sign. He felt a mild electric current going up his arm. It wasn't painful, but he couldn't deny it. As soon as she touched him, he had a vision of himself outside, kneeling on the grass and staring at figures that looked like aliens. But it wasn't his own point of view. It came with a strong sense of being alone in the universe, which made him gasp and pull his hand away. He asked in the morning air, "What are you?" Nothing. Not during the day. Walt knew what was going on. The presence showed up at night when he wasn't as careful, when he was alone, and when the darkness made it easier to believe the impossible. He did things all day to learn. Burnt circles, geometric symbols, blue light. His time on the internet took him down rabbit holes of government cover-ups and conspiracy theories. But one story made him think. A farmer in Oregon talked about the same circles and the same feeling of being called. The story ended quickly. I'm not going to write anything else about this. But know this. Don't fight back if you're going through this. They don't come to hurt. They come to remind you. What does this remind me of? Walt was angry as he thought. Walt made a choice that night. He wouldn't run if it came back. He was going to go outside. He would want to know the truth. He was losing his mind because he was stuck in limbo. He got ready like a soldier, putting on more clothes, a hot drink of strong coffee, and the wooden cross he carried in his pocket, not as a weapon, but as a comfort. 7 p.m. He sat outside. 9 p.m. It got cold. 10:47 p.m. There was silence. The light started to pulse in the middle of the triangle. This time, the shape didn't appear slowly. It did nothing but stand there, as if going through a door that wasn't there. It was tall and thin, and it was wrapped in blue light that was layered and deep, like living energy. Walt saw the face for the first time. Eyes so big they looked like they could hold whole galaxies. His mind struggled to process the delicate features that were alien. As those eyes looked at him, it was like they were reading the depths of his soul. Walt got up. He went down the steps to the porch. He got out on the grass. The presence didn't move. At the edge of the next circle, Walt stopped. He said, "I'm here," and his voice was surprisingly calm. "Do you want to talk? Then talk. But speak up. Not any more games. Only the truth." The presence shook its head. Walt knew the answer in his gut before he could put it into words. "Are you ready?" That one question was very important. Walt was sure that what he said would make a difference. "Yes," Walt said in a whisper. Then, more loudly, "Yes, I'm ready." Even though the presence didn't move, Walt felt a wave of thought come over him. The being was measuring his scars, his fear, and his hope. "What are you?" Walt asked. "Where do you come from?" The answer was shown to me. 5 stars, a huge number of them. Stars moving in spirals of light. Planets that people could never see with a telescope. Walt was so amazed by how big the universe was that it made his knees weak. "From afar," the voice said in a different tone. "But it's not what you think distance means. We're always close, always looking out, always ready for you when you are." "Ready for what?" Walt moved toward her. "To take over? So they can study us like animals?" Walt thought that the presence would have smiled if it could. "To remember." "Remember what?" Walt made fists. "Stop talking in riddles." Walt was approached by the sinister presence. Even though his instinct told him to run, he stood still. The presence noticed. "You are scared. Afraid of me. But you're scared of yourself more." "Why?" Walt said. "I'm not afraid of myself. You scare me. What you are capable of. I can do nothing that you won't allow." Walt opened his eyes. "I think about you. You're reading what I'm thinking. What does that allow?" "Because you let them in. Every night, every prayer that doesn't mean anything, every prayer to God. You called. I just showed up to help with the quiz." "No," Walt said in protest. "God was in my thoughts, to the Lord, not to you." The presence shook its head. "Do you think there's a difference? God is the one who made everything. I am a part of him." "Of course there's a difference," Walt yelled. "God is holy, divine. You look like an alien. You are flesh and blood, or whatever you are. It's not the same." It was very quiet. "Walt Bennett," the voice said, in a way that seemed oddly personal. "You've prayed to something you thought was up in the sky your whole life. Split up. Not possible." "Yes." "What if I told you this separation is the biggest lie anyone has ever told you?" Walt's heart was beating fast. "Liar? Who is telling lies? The Bible? The church? Not a wicked lie. A lie from not knowing, afraid. In charge." Now only 10 meters separate them from the presence. Walt could see that the light was patterned like electricity flowing below the surface. "What you say about Jesus, you honor him, you love him, you're scared of him. You never did ask what he was really like, though." "Son of God," Walt automatically answered. "The Savior. The Messiah." "Yes." "What does that really mean?" Walt spoke, but nothing came out. He had always taken the titles at face value and never looked into what they really meant. Walt finally said, "He had power. He made people well again. He made food grow bigger. He brought the dead back to life. Because God made him strong. And you think this power was unique to him?" There was a chill in the air around the question. Walt felt like something inside him was breaking down. "Yes," he said in a weak voice. "It had to be only them. He was unique." "He was," the presence said. "But not because of what you were taught. Because he remembered. He was unique. Because he knew. He hadn't forgotten what you all have forgotten." "Forgotten what?" Walt begged with tears in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" A long, fluid arm was raised and pointed straight at Walt by the presence. "I forgot about this. About the real you. About what you can really do. About the power that lies dormant inside you. Power that you haven't used, recognized or denied for generations because of teachings that have made you small, weak, and reliant." Walt turned away and shook his head. "No. I'm just a man. No, old, broken. I don't have power." "You are wrong." "Am I? Then why does my body hurt? Why does my life seem to be short? Why do I have to suffer?" "Because you create it." The voice in my head became more urgent. "Every day you make the same reality of pain and lack. Every thought, every faith. I am unworthy. I am a sinner. I do not deserve it. And God punishes me are all things you tell yourself. You make your own jail, and then you blame God for putting you there. Is it enough for you to think you were born to suffer? Declare your readiness to accept your true identity entity as a child of the source right away." I let go of my fear and accept my divine power. Now is the time for your reality to change." Walt felt like he was hit hard by the words. "No," he said carefully. "It can't be that simple. It's not easy. The truth is very hard to hear, because it means you're in charge. It means you're not a slave. It means that the power you believe is in God, Jesus, and the saints is also inside you." Walt broke down and cried out loud as he hit the cold grass. "Oh, so everything was a lie? My faith?" "No lie," said a voice that was getting closer. The presence was on its knees in front of him. Skewed truth. Christ tried to show it. He told them, "The kingdom of God is inside you. You will do greater things," he told her. They wouldn't listen, though. It was easier to make him impossible to reach. It was easier to worship him than to do what he did. Walt put his head up. He could see the being watching him with pure, old love through his tears. "Who are you?" Walt asked. "Really?" "Someone who can remember." Someone was sent to help people remember before it's too late. The presence put out a hand. "See?" Walt reached out. The world went crazy with light when their hands touched. Walt was no longer outside. He wasn't anywhere or anywhere else. Stars were born and died in front of his eyes. He saw an infinite web of energy going through everything, linking every atom, star, and living thing. This is where he saw himself. Not as a dot, but as an important node. He had the same creative energy that the stars do. The voice asked again, "Do you understand? They are not separate. It never was. The separation between you and God, or between the Creator and the created, is a vision. You carry the source with you." The vision changed. Walt saw a man walking along Galilee's dusty roads. Christ, but not the pale person in paintings. A real man with rough hands from working as a carpenter. The presence murmured. He knew. He knew from a very young age. He could still remember that the Creator had made him in his image and likeness. Plus, if you are made in the image of the Creator, you have his traits. What he can do. His strength. To Walt, Jesus was in front of a hungry crowd. 5 loaves, 2 fish. But Walt could see what Jesus was doing inside. There was no pleading for a miracle in his eyes. While others saw scarcity, he saw abundance everywhere. His feeling was that there was enough, no doubt about it. And reality changed because of this faith that was knowledge, this certainty. The presence explained, he had no power that you don't have. He knew things. He knew thoughts make things happen. That feeling comes true, that words are decrees that make things happen. But he was the Son of God, Walt spoke out in the vision. What do you perceive the phrase, Son of God, to mean? The Creator made each of you in his or her own image. Christ knew this. He lived by it. Neither did he think of himself as separate or unworthy. In his physical form, he saw himself as an expression of God. The vision changed to one of healing. Jesus stood next to a man who was paralyzed. Walt saw that the sick man's own healing spark instead of something outside of him. He only saw the truth in Jesus' eyes, which was that he was whole. The presence said, illness starts in the mind. The body does what the mind does. The body hears you when you say, I don't deserve health. The universe tells you, yes, you are poor, when you think that. Walt cried as decades of beliefs came apart. Why did no one teach me this? As they say, why do they say we are unworthy sinners? Because fear rules. Because guilt ties people together. You give up your power when you think you are small and need other people. Walt, you don't need to be saved. Wake up! Walt himself was seen in the last vision. He didn't see his body as old and broken, though. He saw it as full of life and energy. He did not view his life as an inevitable scarcity, but rather as a blank canvas that needed to be painted. The presence said firmly, "God didn't make your pain. You made it with thoughts of not being good enough. God is you, and you express sin. He is making exactly what you think you deserve." The hand got tighter around Walt's. All of a sudden he was shaking and back on the cold grass in Tennessee. But something inside him had changed for good. The presence spoke with a voice as soft as a breeze in the real world. Jesus showed the way. He proved that having faith does not mean having hope. It is a sure thing. He demonstrated that you must first see it in your mind before you can see its physical manifestation. You need to be thankful before you can get something. "Let it be done" is not a request, it's a command. Walt looked at his scarred, shaking hands. He didn't see the hands of an old man who was broken for the first time. There were hands in front of him. God made our hands to look like his. He asked, "How? Where do I start? How can I change the 64 years of thinking I'm small?" The presence looked like it was happy. One thought at a time. One idea at a time. It begins now. Pick a different way to think. Walt felt hope, which he had forgotten he had. Not the empty hope of someone who needs to be saved, but the real hope of someone who knows the keys to their own cell. Walt didn't see the presence in the days that followed, but he felt like it was guiding him. He began to follow the code. The first thing that changed was what he said. It was him who said, "I never have enough money." He stopped. "Do you hear what you decree?" the voice asked in a whisper. Walt fixed himself. "I have a lot. Things keep coming to me." He kept going, even though it felt weird. The second change was how he saw himself. He stopped when he saw himself in the mirror and thought, "Ugly old man. I can. My hands make lovely things." The third change was in the body. When Walt's arthritis got worse, he closed his eyes instead of taking it as a cross to bear. He put his hands on his joints. "You're fine. Health is my decree. Thanks." Before the pain went away, he thanked God. The swelling went down after 20 minutes. It wasn't magic right away, but it was real. The voice inside him told him, "Focus on pain, and pain grows. Pay attention to gratitude, and it grows." No, it's not ignoring the issues. Choosing what to eat. After 3 weeks, the presence came back one last time. When Walt came out of his workshop, the being was already there. The presence said, "You look different." Walt smiled as he looked at his steady hands. "I'm starting to remember." "Why doesn't the church teach this?" Walt asked one more time. It wasn't always hidden. He tried, Jesus. But worshipping a savior is easier than accepting that you have the same abilities. Making you feel small gives you power. When you remember that you are divine, you are free. "What now?" Walt asked. "Be aware of your life. Say abundance when you feel like you don't have enough. If you see sickness, say you are healthy. Every day I have to do it, but it's the only work that matters." "Are you coming back?" "I don't need to." You remember now. The voice you hear is your own inner wisdom, which is your link to the source. The light started to go out. Christ came to show us what is possible when we remember who we are. There is no such thing as an unworthy sinner waiting for salvation. You are a powerful creator who is just waiting to wake up. You've always had the choice. The presence was gone. Walt didn't feel alone, though. He was whole. After 6 months, Walt woke up without any pain. The arthritis wasn't too bad. 3 jobs were on the books at his workshop. The money was spent. He looked at the cross made of wood that was on his wall. It was no longer a sign of pain for him. He thought of a man who tried to show the world a revolutionary truth 2,000 years ago. The power we look for in other people has always been inside us. God is not separate. We are the creative force expressing itself through him. The way we think, feel, and speak changes when they are in line with this truth. It's not magic, it's alignment. After putting down his saw, Walt was ready to start another day of conscious creation. "I am the image and likeness of the Creator," he said to himself in a whisper. "I have strength. Abundance is my right." That's what I want to remember today. As it always does, the universe said, "Yes, it is done." It's likely that Walt's journey shows you something you've felt but couldn't put into words. You have a lot more power than you think. As you read about Jesus, remember that you hold the creative spark of the source. It's not about worshipping someone far away. The things you think, feel, and say can change the way things are in your life. What stood out to you about this story? Have you ever felt like you had power within you but didn't know how to use it? Have you ever thought about why you struggle with scarcity when your soul craves abundance? What do you think? Tell us in the comments. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to explore the path between cosmic truth and ancient faith. By joining us, you're committing to your own awakening journey and being a part of a group of believers who aren't afraid to look into the divine unknown. Also, please share this video with someone you know who is going through a valley of shadows or who is wondering what their purpose is. Your straightforward act of sharing could be the divine intervention they've been waiting for, giving light to a soul in need of hope. Like this story? If it made you think about old beliefs and opened up new options for you, then please subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon. We are putting together a group of seekers who are ready to question what they think they know about spirituality, purpose, and their full potential. Check out my book, Reconnecting with Your Divine Essence, if you want to learn more about these teachings and how to use the creative power that has always been inside you. The link is in the comment that became a pin. It's a useful guide to the path of self-discovery that can change the way you think about who you are. You don't require external salvation, remember. It's time for an internal awakening. That awakening starts right now, with a choice, with a thought, with a phrase. Thanks for seeing it. Your presence here isn't a coincidence. Maybe you are also being asked to remember.